Hey everyone, here we go with another installment of the PrimateCast.
Evolution,
communication,
cognition,
conservation,
behavior.
Primatology.
Typically primates.
Become the monkey.
Thanks everyone for joining us on the PrimateCast. This is podcast number 58, and the release date is Sunday, April the 12th, 2020. Now we're bouncing around a little bit in time. This happens to be the first installment of the PrimateCast, at least for now, recorded during the global lockdown of COVID-19. And so the interview that we're going to give in a few moments here, which was done with EcoHealth Alliance disease ecologist Dr. Anne Laudisoit, was actually recorded on March the 2nd at the Primate Research Institute during a visit there. We'll talk about this in a moment with my co-host, Dr. Cécile Sarabian, who I'll also bring back to the studio in a moment. But the preview with Cécile and I was recorded on March the 23rd, and now here I am sitting in my own living room on April the 11th evening. Our prefecture of Aichi just declared a state of emergency as of yesterday afternoon, and so we've joined the other 7 prefectures that went on lockdown a couple of days ago. So things are looking a little bit different around here. Of course, around the world, they've been looking a little bit different for quite some time, over a month in many places, and everybody is just in a really uncertain time. So for all of you who are listening at this really strange time in our lives, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you're all managing well. So I guess one of the nice things for the PrimateCast is that I'm going to try and pump out a few of our archived interviews. This particular one being a bit newer, but it also gives me a chance to bring back something that hasn't turned up in the PrimateCast for a while, Conservation Voices, with now Dr. Cécile Sarabian. Welcome back to the studio, Cécile. Nice to have you back.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've recorded one of these together.
Yeah, since, I guess the end of my PhD at least.
Yeah, no kidding. I think that's one of the reasons we went on hiatus, wasn't it? To get you sorted out for your PhD.
Yeah.
Any excuse we can throw into the listeners here for why we disappeared. Well, priorities, of course. But now our priority is to get back. And so who's joining us in the podcast today?
Dr. Anne Laudisoit, who is a senior scientist at the EcoHealth Alliance in New York, where I think you have some connections.
Yeah, right? that was fun when she first walked in, and we greeted each other, and she had some greetings from some folks back there that I have never actually met, but I've communicated with via email a whole bunch because talking about Alexi, so a shout out to you, Alexi. Hey, I've been for the last few years one of the editors on the journal EcoHealth, which is put out by that organization, and so that's a scientific publication that focuses on anything infectious disease or disease and ecology. So the ecology of health, part of this kind of growing One Health movement, where you would want to look at not just human health, but because it happens in a context. It's human health in the context of environmental health, wildlife, livestock health, so all of these things that interact to determine how healthy we are as people and as populations. And so the EcoHealth Alliance is also stemming from that ideology, where they've been through a huge project that they've got called Predict, going around the world trying to target new areas, new animals to study, new human populations, basically trying to hunt new viruses and genotype them and try and figure out what kinds of things are out there that might end up causing us problems in the future. And so now this COVID-19 is an example of that. It's not something that we would have predicted specifically, but it's been known for a really long time already that viruses like that are bound to emerge. And they do so on small scales all the time, very rarely these kind of huge scales as we're witnessing right now.
Yeah, so very relevant interview at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so why was Anne here? Maybe you could explain what the connection is between her and you.
Yeah, so we met at the 27th International Primatological Society Congress in Nairobi, so a few years ago, in 2018. And we were actually part of the same football team. This was like a parallel event that was organized, and we're part of the Great Apes team, which happened to win the cup. So
those great ape teams.
And so for those of you who are part of IPS, Steve Shapiro was the judge on our final game with his little shorts. And,
the treasurer of IPS.
Yeah.
Handing out judgments.
So that's how we met, and then we kept in touch. And as we will talk about, is also the director and the co-author of this film Buddha in the Chimpanzees' Footsteps, talking about this newly discovered population of chimpanzees in eastern DRC in the Ituri province. And as I took some month away after my PhD, after April 2019, when I left PRI for a few months, I also went on to some kind of filming adventure, and that's how we also kept in touch, exchanging ideas and ways of making your first film.
Yeah, and so you got in touch with her to invite her to this year's International Symposium of the Primatology and Wildlife Science, which is at one of our graduate programs here. But unfortunately, she obviously wasn't able to speak there because of this sudden pandemic of COVID-19. And obviously this interview wasn't planned, but it turns out to be a pretty good coincidence to be able to talk to someone who specializes in infectious disease in wildlife at a time when this pandemic is actually caused by our kind of inappropriate interactions with wildlife.
Yeah, exactly. So, and instead of participating in this conference, gave an international seminar here at PRI where she talked about the monkeypox virus, for example, which is also quite relevant to the current outbreak we are facing now. But she also came to talk about her recent movie shot in eastern DRC on a newly discovered population of chimpanzees there in the Ituri province. So we organized a special event for that with Conserve Session. So Conserve Session, which is the student and postdoc-led initiative on sharing information and discussing about conservation / environmental / animal welfare issues, and inviting experts to talk about that. So
yeah, that's a pretty cool opportunity. So your idea is to share, to screen documentaries and then have a panel discussion, often involving the people who are involved in making the movies.
Yeah, so we're expanding a bit on the format. So it's not only documentaries only now, but it started like that, and now we can organize like photo exhibitions, organize discussions with those experts and the public. Or even participating in like Nerd Night or Pechakucha platforms for those who know. Check out those on Facebook and social media. So just basically trying to reach out on an issue with the public. Yeah.
And so it's almost never before been so salient, the idea of how we need to be so concerned about how we're treating nature, than when we have these massive pandemics of things that originated in nature and through kind of inappropriate interactions with it. So in the podcast, what is Anne going to be talking about here?
So Anne will be mainly talking about her epidemiologist background and how she got into that field. She will also talk about the monkeypox virus, which she has expertise on, but she will also, I think, more broadly relate to the field of epidemiology and infectious disease and how anthropogenic pressures may also affect all that. Yeah,
one thing I was really impressed with and entertained by is kind of how diverse she's thinking about things. And, you know, so she might have started with an epidemiology, infectious disease, ecology background, but is also so passionate about people and especially in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where she works frequently. Just the community kind of level involvement and how hard these kinds of infectious diseases can be for communities and getting them to change behaviors and things, for example, was really striking, the way she was talking about those kind of things.
Yeah, she's one of those persons you can feel, as you will hear, very passionate about what she does, and taking all her strength and energy to develop projects there and to also lead community-based conservation projects and etc. So she perfectly knows also what she's talking about. So it's very pleasant to listen to her and her expertise as an epidemiologist working not only in DRC, but as you will hear, she has worked also in various places and different species, whether it's wildlife or pathogens. So, yeah.
Okay, so let's get right into the interview then. Okay, so thanks so much for joining us on the PrimateCast. It's a real pleasure to have you here. We're really excited about talking more. And first, I'll just apologize. Not that we have any control over global events, but we are sorry that we've invited you all this way and we didn't even get to have you at our symposium, or the leading graduate program in primatology and wildlife science had invited you to give a talk there. But some of the other things are still on, so we'll get into those a little bit as we go on. So we're here with Anne and with Cecile in the studio, and let's have a good chat.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you could just start by giving us a bit of a background. So you came here and you gave a presentation the other day on monkeypox and its relation to things like bushmeat. And so that's something we'll talk about in this interview as well. But what were all of the things that led up to this? You said you lived in, or you've been working in DR Congo for the last 15 years or something. So how does that happen?
Okay, so, well, yeah, I've always been interested in traveling and discovering new cultures and new places through probably zoology. So I really like animals and discovering them and being outside. So I like hiking, climbing, kayaking. And I happened to start working in the Congo in 2004, and I was then doing a second master degree, and I was trapping rats and studying their parasites, ectoparasites, in Kinshasa. So I got this opportunity with the University of Liège. And so I started to collect rats and trap them in Kinshasa. And that's when I got interested also in plague, first of all, bubonic plague, which is my main expertise. And then more into the Congo, get interested in getting more and more into the bush. And that's also when I discovered there was still monkeypox. That was 2010.
So of all of the infectious organisms I've heard you talk about until now, I mean, we're talking about some pretty scary things. And so you start with bubonic plague. So what is that like for a master's student to go into Kinshasa, first of all, and then running around catching a bunch of rats that you suspect are infected with plague? Or at that time, maybe you didn't know about it.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, first of all, I backpacked a year and a half before that. So I was like confident that I could travel safely. I didn't know yet what Kinshasa was like. For sure, I wouldn't make it my first destination as a master's student. But because I had traveled before, it was fine. I was also, well mentored over there. But really the feeling was freedom. Like everything is so disorganized that it was actually the best one of the best time. And I was a poor broken student paying for my studies, so I would take those buses, those mini buses in the town that they call esprit de mort, so death spirit. But trapping at night and then going in the morning to get the rodents in their traps, and then taking those buses, rushing to get a seat in and have those rats there, and some of them were dead, so they were smelling, and that was a nice story. But I didn't know there was bubonic plague. Well, there was no bubonic plague in Kinshasa, but I didn't know just overall there was bubonic plague in the world. But then I learned that the most active focus was actually the Ituri region in the Congo, and that's exactly where I went during my PhD to check for that, and then that led me also to the discovery afterward of the chimpanzees. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, plague is not. I guess now with kind of global climate on infectious disease, people always revisit the idea of historical infectious diseases that cause all kinds of problems in human populations, and of course, plague is one of them. But what can you maybe say from your own work and then just more generally about what the current situation is then and what's actually happening?
Yeah, it's nice because it's a disease that has a major remaining question, which is why it remains in endemic foci, why plague persists only there and it doesn't spread like epidemic waves like in the past. So that's the major question is, well, one of the reasons why it doesn't spread like waves is probably hygiene, the less rodents and less chaos in terms of hygiene in the streets for us. There are other theories, like there might also be a territorial immunity caused by other Yersinia that are co-immunogenic.
So Yersinia is the name of the organism.
Oh, sorry, yes. Yeah. So Yersinia pestis is the name of the bacterium. And it's a bacterium. But, where it survives, it's not very clear whether or not there is a seasonality. It's not that obvious. While people in the field, they will say, oh, it's rainy, the beginning of the rainy season, for example, in the Congo, they will say, oh, that's the beginning of the plague season. So we cannot really show it in the data, but that's what they say. So there are several theories, but one that starts to prevail is that plague, which is not supposed to be producing spores or a resistant form, might survive in the ground, but under certain circumstances, which might be, ecological niche or like the stoichiometric niche of the soil, let's say, like a lot of salt. That's one of the recent paper, for example. And I'm convinced that, it survives in the ground. I don't know how, but a good way to suggest that is in different places, it disappeared for 30 to 50 years and it re-emerged exactly in the same hamlet, not even the same village, the same hamlet. So it's something that can't move over 30 years. So that's the major question, and we'd like to answer that question.
So what are people kind of doing now because it's not something that you hear about globally very often anymore. So are there kind of ongoing eradication projects, or who's kind of invested in this issue apart from people like yourself doing research and trying to figure it out ecologically?
So there are few people doing ecological research. I will say zero in the Congo because that's, again, the area is a bit remote and not very advertisable. But many things are being done in labs to test this hypothesis. And one of them is also not only the plague itself, the bacterium, but in association with amoebas, free soil amoebas. And in terms of eradication, there is a big problem in Madagascar. So you have plague nearly every year, and sometimes you have huge outbreaks, like 2 years ago. And there you have rodent control campaigns, dusting of houses, and you have new things like that developing. I know the WHO is very active. They have a massive eradication, rodent control campaign going on.
So something else that, and this is coming more to what you spoke about the other day here at the Primate Research Institute, but another, I would say, part of a group of organisms that has gotten a lot of attention because of the one that's already been eradicated, smallpox, is monkeypox. So pox viruses is another thing that you've also been studying quite intensively as well recently. So maybe you can touch on that as well.
So again, it's really from the field point of view. I don't do like lab experiments and things like that. But so the smallpox has been eradicated or declared eradicated the 8th May 1980 by the WHO, which was the major victory, and that's why the WHO is so famous or so respected. It really got that from notoriety from the eradication of the smallpox. But during the eradication campaign of the smallpox, there were a few cases of a smallpox-like disease that actually was compared to sequences that were found in 1958 in captive monkeys, but in Denmark.
Wow.
So it was compared to that, and they realized it was monkeypox. So of course there was a whole discussion about we are on the process of eradication, declaring the eradication of smallpox, but you have this disease emerging, this other disease emerging. Let's try to see in every country what's happening. And actually between 70 and 80 they found out that it was like around 60 cases they found out, mostly in West Africa and the Congo. But what happened then is that every year there's been an increase in monkeypox cases in the Congo Basin, and more specifically in the DR Congo, to the point that like in the last decade you have had 15,000 cases.
Oh wow!
And I always say it's interesting to compare it, to the size of countries you live in, or because if I think a territory big like France or like half Japan will report smallpox-like disease cases every month or nearly every day in some region, I think we will have heard about it. And I think most of maybe the people who are listening to us haven't heard of this disease. And it's a reality that, again, it's a neglected disease, not well funded. And it started to get attention when it crossed the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2003, there was an outbreak, the first ever imported human outbreak of monkeypox, and it was in the US. And so CDC invested a lot then in the field, and they are the one who really make all the effort to develop a vaccine in collaboration with, obviously, pharmaceuticals companies. And this vaccine has been approved last year. So now there is a vaccine, but of course, by the time, it's going to reach the people, in the Congo, who's going to pay for it, who's going to fund for that, all these are still the pending questions.
Mm.
And the second thing maybe that's also very important is like smallpox didn't have a zoonotic reservoir. So you have no renewable resource. So if you eradicate it in everybody, then you should be able to actually get rid of it. But monkeypox has one or many reservoirs we don't know. And the suspect guilty reservoirs are rodents, squirrels. It's not very obvious yet. But squirrels are good candidates because they've been found positive, but some of them have been found sick, and you can't be a good reservoir if you fall sick. The same for some rodent species. So it's not very, very obvious yet. Yeah.
Mm. So what is the kind of work that you do on the ground then to try and figure this out?
So at the beginning, it was, looking for the reservoir. And actually, I'm not doing it anymore because I'm moving on and doing, chimpanzee work. But my colleagues are pursuing that. And so they have a new project. And the project is rescreen all the samples, even from other projects, and even museum specimens, and see if they appear pox viruses in those samples, see where they are from, and see if they can figure out if there is one or many reservoir, if it's linked with genetic parameters, because they have like a bigger ground.
Mm-hmm.
And but on my side, I just finished a project which was really aiming at helping the people, the health staff in the field, like small nurses in their remote field location, to diagnose and to also improve the reporting, the alerting, so that the outbreaks will be limited in numbers and diagnostic will be also performed in time. So that's mostly what we did in the last 2 years with the team of Kisangani.
I see. So can you maybe just explain a bit? So how similar are the outcomes of infection with monkeypox in people as something like smallpox historically? And then maybe some of the other the pox viruses that are out there.
Yeah, so if you see a picture of smallpox and monkeypox, you can't distinguish them, really. If you see those pictures for the first time, you wouldn't be able to distinguish them. So it's very, very scary when you see that, because it reminds stories from the 50s. I think it's 1 on 10 people who were still dying of smallpox in the 50s. So it's not that old. So the symptoms, they are vesicles, like you have a rash. And one thing with monkeypox is like the rash appears at once. It's like one burst of rash, and all the lesions, which are vesicle, pustule, and then macules, and then it becomes a crust. They all evolve at the same rate. So it's really the same. That's a way to diagnose it compared to chickenpox, for example. In monkeypox, you might have also swollen lymph nodes in the neck, which you wouldn't get in chickenpox either. So and then maybe one bad collateral damage is that sometimes the lesions comes on the eye, and then you become blind. So that's what we see in the Congo, and it's not documented. It's been documented with all the work that the CDC and the UCLA people have done, but there are so many cases and so many variation in the clinic that clearly there is an immune question behind the evolution of the disease. And so maybe that's how, maybe to answer the question why monkeypox is emerging, is probably because the people who were vaccinated against smallpox pre-80s had still a residual immunity against any orthopox virus. And that's exactly the principle of vaccination. It's like you use the immunogenic properties of the pox viruses to actually protect someone from another one. And so now the people, so the generation, let's say, they are 40 years old, and they are totally vulnerable. The kids born after 80, they are vulnerable to monkeypox. They have zero immunity. And that's what we think, that the disease started to percolate in younger people because they were not immune. And the only way to stop, I will say, this big epidemic is vaccination would be great. But maybe more research also on, first of all, like, can you get reinfected if you have already had monkeypox once? Or are there other orthopox viruses circulating in the wildlife that make you immune? And so you have a baseline level of immunity against every orthopox virus and you're fine. All those questions we don't know. So there is a lot of research still to be done, even if there is a vaccine now. Yeah.
But another line of research you've been talking about is also how contact with wildlife, say through markets and bushmeat trade, for example, can actually expose people to this as well. And I mean, that reminds us now in the current, again, COVID-19 situation where, you know, wildlife markets seem to be a source of all kinds of nasty things that ends up percolating in our societies as well. So what's the status of that as well?
Yeah, so we haven't traced any monkeypox outbreak that started from a bushmeat market, but we have traced index cases that have consumed bushmeat from the village, hunted by the father or the uncle or a neighbor, and that was obvious that they had eaten something that made them sick, and that was either a giant rat or a duiker or a squirrel. So we have this evidence. Now, so monkeypox virus, orthopox viruses are DNA viruses, so they are more resistant than RNA viruses, like the COVID-19. So we suspect that monkeypox might still remain or be more infectious even for a longer period of time on a bushmeat stall than for example, a pangolin that would be infected with an RNA virus. But still, it probably reminds the world that it's good maybe to stop or refrain from eating bushmeat and maybe without veterinary also control, certificate and things like that. Yeah.
Cool. And I think you mentioned, so in the talk you gave here at the Primate Research Institute, that people do not show any sign of avoidance of their family members or other people in the village showing the symptoms of the monkeypox and these vesicles. Did you observe any form of avoidance?
So we will be the first one to try not to touch someone with monkeypox, clearly. We try to avoid it as much as we can, but it's very, even the medical doctors, well, they will wear gloves, but they don't seem as scared as we are. Like, our perception of the disease maybe is different, but for the villagers, they don't seem to realize that it's really bad. The only so the kids go, well, if it's a kid, they go to school, they all go to church, so they shake they shake hands, they dance together, they eat in the same plate. Those principle of transmission and how it might get transmitted, it's not really either not known or they don't really take them into account in their behavior. But when we speak with the people, they just don't know how it's transmitted, or they don't believe it comes from animals, or they don't believe it's transmitted. So there is a lot of outreach and sensitization to be done.
So having been in that country for the past 15 years, you also told us that you have a clear commitment to the local people as well. So what kind of things are you doing with the local communities when these pathogens are emerging?
So exactly. That's the problem. It's when these kinds of things are emerging. So sometimes you get more easily funds because it becomes a serious issue, like now for the COVID-19. But of course, prevention, well, it's prevention, so it should be done before, right? So, but each time we go to the field, we do this kind of sensitization. First of all, we have a gathering with all the nurses of the health zones. You know, the Congo is divided into health zones, and each health zone in health areas. And every month, all the nurses responsible for each health area, they meet in the chief town of the health zone. So they share the epidemiological events. So we use that system to actually organize our workshop like in the same time, so that we could also transmit all what we've been discussing. So that's one way to reach very easily like 200,000 people, because they go back and then they transmit to the villager. And that's how we did it, to sensitize the people. And we use the radio, because in some places, so people usually don't, the adults, not a lot of people can read and write. And you don't have network most of the time where we work. So the only way, they have local radios. And we go and do like here interviews and also radio broadcast about why you have a group of people in the village, what they are doing. They even say, okay, they are there, they can speak with you if you have questions. We try to remain open and accessible so that the people can come and discuss.
So talking about local people, you have recently shot a movie, Buddha, in the chimpanzees' footsteps in the region, with the photojournalist Caroline Thirion, and local scientists as well as guides, on this recently discovered community of chimpanzees in Ituri province. So can you tell us a bit more on what led you and these people to report on this?
So it's very funny because indeed, I found, but it's not, I realized there was a population of chimpanzees in the bubonic plague area in the Ituri province. And it was only in 2015 that I realized that. But I was not working on plague anymore. By then, I was working on river blindness. And I was collecting flies in rivers. And it's because I had to collect flies in fast-flowing rivers that I had to go along the escarpment of the Albert Lake, where the rivers are flowing fast. And that's when I saw a little fragment of forest. And I asked to my guide, Oti, that you can see in the movie as well.
So we are talking about the movie Buddha in the chimpanzees' footsteps that was shot in 2017?
Yes, correct.
In Ituri province in DR Congo.
Yeah. So in that movie, Buddha, there is a guy, he's called Oti, and has been my guide and my friend and my logistician now for 7 years. And because he also learned how to collect the flies and pupae in the rivers to help. And then as we were going down the escarpment of the Lake Albert, we saw this forest fragment, and this is the first time I see a forest there, because everything is deforested. So even the Mount Aboro, which is the highest peak there, was still forested till 1985, 87, and then all was gone in 92. Around 92. So he said that in this forest there were various animals, but also monkeys, and he mentions the chimpanzees. And I'm not at all a primatologist, so I didn't know anything about the chimpanzees and home range and how they live by then. And but I said, so are they the chimpanzee? So I said the name. I imitated the chimpanzee. Said yes, and they come in the field sometimes. I had a hard time believing, because to me this was more maybe like 1 square kilometer forest, which is even less. We realized was even less. And so we did our work that day, and on the way back we heard the chimpanzees. And so that really triggered some kind of something else in my brain and in my adventure life. And I decided that maybe it's a new species. Maybe it's a new subspecies, which makes it very exciting. And I decided to document them. So I was teaching at the University of Kisangani, and the C4 was my employer, and they funded the first exploration in the area. And that's how we started to go back to Ituri more and more and find out that there were at least 35 chimpanzees living there. Yeah.
So when you talk to people in the chimpanzee community, I mean, are people surprised by that? This sounds really surprising to find this kind of almost a relic population, right? I mean, how close are they to a source population, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the closest is probably around Lake Albert in Uganda. So from Murchison going east. And then if you cross Albert Lake to Uganda, Budongo, which would be 65, 70 kilometers. And on the
but that's across the lake. So
but that's across
if
the
you
lake.
go over land,
they cannot swim or they cannot paddle.
That,
no,
yeah.
But in land, it's about 60 kilometers as well. But so it's an interesting question because I cannot say I have the clear answer to that because there are like 18 such fragments. And the bigger one is I don't have the number. It's like around 13 square kilometers, the bigger fragment that we haven't explored because of very major security issues there. And this fragment is 40 kilometers from the edge of the major forest. And we know there are chimpanzees there, people have told us. So you have clearly a fragmented population along the Albert Lake Scarp, and we don't know how well they mix or if they exchange individuals and if they do well in the savannah. And just added to that is like we work really on the scarp, so where you have an altitude and in 2 kilometers, if you climb 2 kilometers, you go from 600 meter to 2000. So it's very, very steep. And the part on top is called the Lendu Plateau. And then you start going toward the Aru Biringi landscape. And there is also a mixed savanna gallery, and nobody knows there are chimpanzees there, but they are. And nobody is studying them either. So there is a lot still to discover.
So what was your main motivation for making this movie?
The movie first, the major motivation for the movie was that nobody wanted to fund any conservation project there, or say a research project that would not be only exploratory because of the flag red zone. So because it's been considered like this since 90, you had a big ethnic war there. So between the end of the 90s till 2006, since then it's been like that. Ituri is a red zone. So not a lot of people are going. Some researchers go. And but in those forests, nobody was going. So when I faced those, people who were always saying, no, don't fund that, or we wouldn't be able to send people, we cannot support you because if something happened, that would be our responsibility. I decided that I had to make a movie to show the people it's possible to work there. And not only is it possible, but I work with the locals and I work with the Congolese master's students and PhD students, and we are doing a good job. So that's how the idea started. And of course, then when the people saw us coming, and we were approached by the people from the University of the Blue Mountain, which is based in Pandro Mareti, and they had already drafted a conservation plan for the Blue Mountain. So they really need more legal or official support and maybe international advertising to show the biodiversity rich area they live in. And that's what I think we are doing for them now. Yeah. And supporting also some initiatives. Like I was... So I try to, when there are some ground call for proposals, and if it's in French, it's easy because they can drive them directly. When it's in English, it's a bit more complicated. But then I ask them, for example, to draft them in French. Then I translate them for them, and we try to get some small grants. We cannot have a huge grant, but we don't need a huge grant. What we want to do doesn't cost a lot, but you need basic funding to start it. So it's not once it's started, I think it can be sustainable. Yeah.
So apart from the motivation you just explained about the need for a movie like that to bring attention to this area, just as yourself with your kind of background, how did that? Was it something that you just thought we just need to make a movie, or what was the experience that led to even having the concept that a movie would be something you could make about this?
So clearly that was the motivation, because I didn't see any. I didn't do like social media, Instagram, all that. I don't do that. I'm old school. No, I started to go, but anyway. So that was the first. It was the most obvious thing I could do. I have a friend. She's a photojournalist. She has made like 2 corporate movies. I'm pretty sure she loves Congo. She produced the only guidebook about Congo, touristic guidebook. So she will be the perfect person. So I went back in February 2017 saying, we need to make a movie. Yes, you're coming. Yes. So it was a movie between friends to start with. Mm-hmm. We had no funding. So I even had no job then. And I invested some money to buy the gear and to shoot the movie. And we were there as friends, and then we needed to edit the movie, but had no money. So we waited a year and then did a crowdfunding, got the money, and then and got a producer also, and managed to finish the movie. So it's not like a process like, oh yeah, we made a movie, It's
sure.
no, it was a whole process. But the idea itself, yes, came from the fact that, I guess it's the only way to take the voice of the people over and show that it's possible to work there. Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing, because I just don't think that your average person will be like, let's just make a movie. Obviously, the amount of production you need, even on a small budget or small scale, is people who have a lot of background in filmmaking can still struggle with that. So I just think that's so impressive to go and do this.
Well, it's Mark Twain. He said they didn't know it was impossible, so they did it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good attitude.
Exactly. So what's next? I heard you just got a National Geographic grant to continue that endeavor.
So, see, I don't know if the movie helped, but the movie is done, and now I actually got a National Geographic grant to keep working there, refining the densities of chimpanzee, the figures that we found. Also try to document if they have more cultural or traditional behavior that will be local, if there are any altitude adaptation to this population, but also to have I want to develop a citizen science component, since we cannot be there all the time, since people are living there all the time. With Tony Romani, who works with the Faculty of Artes Liberales in Poland, he helped to develop a cyber tracker app, the interface for the site. Mm-hmm. So we will give it to 20 people there so that they can contribute to primate sightings. We will start with primate sightings. So it's even also a way to imply them in the research, involve them in the research. And they were already super happy when they will see the camera trap results. Mm-hmm. But there it's going to be one step more. So that's one thing. And I realized that, as you were saying, education in any topic is a very important thing to do. Sensitization is one. And we did, I think, a very good job with Oti and Pastor Jérôme, who is also in the movie, who is our preacher, and he preaches the good news of the environment. And it's true. And he's really good at passing messages, because he's also a real pastor in life. Mm-hmm. So it was very good to let the people know, explain what we were doing, who we were, how we were going to work. So one of the components of the National Geographic project that I really want to do is work with kids, because the education component is really important, and they are always kind of left behind, in a sense that they go to school, but the schools in the village are not the best. I will say that the education is not the way we would probably adapt it to modern way of teaching, and they are not at all involved in practicals. So when also we realized that kids were very interested when we were present in the village, when we will show the camera trap results, when we will wash the feces and see the seeds of the monkeys, we decided that we should involve them in the project. And one way of doing it is to actually collect. They won't go in the forest. We will collect the feces of different animals, associate them with the animals with pictures, and then they will be able to choose. It's a game, right? They will be able to choose which animal they want the feces of, and they're gonna not wash them because we also want to prevent disease. So we will wash them for them in front of them, and then so that they see that we take out those seeds of these feces. We let them dry, and then they will be able to plant them themselves and see them growing. And it's like a way to really see the process of forest regeneration, seed dispersal, and also for them to go and plant them wherever they want to do it. Of course, they cannot put them in the crop field of the parents, but they will be guided towards a corridor that we think should be reconstructed so that chimpanzees and other primates can actually move between fragments.
Yeah, feces are an incredible resource of education, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Cecile would know, huh?
Yeah, sure. So maybe to wrap up and maybe go back to your disease biologist background and this newly discovered community of chimpanzee, do you think that monkeypox could be present in the chimpanzees that are present in Ituri province?
So I will say they have already plague. Plague is already in the area. Let's prevent them from getting monkeypox. So monkeypox is more like a disease of lowland tropical rainforests. So there hasn't been any cases documented in altitude. So whether also the disconnection with the main forest, the main source, will act in their favor is also probably true, I think. Because in a Pulu, in the Okapi Faunal Reserve, which is the closest major continuous lowland to mid-height rainforest, there is monkeypox. So this whole forest goes down to Bawele, where is the hot spot. So I guess it protects them from monkeypox, the fact that they are living in fragmented landscape. There was one single case of a kid in Kivu, which is surprising, but they didn't trace the origin of the disease. So it might be that either it's an imported bushmeat or it traveled, but they never thought it was local infection.
And so, but you mentioned bubonic plague as well. So this is something that maybe you'll be following up on as well in the future.
I'd love to. So there is an outbreak currently for the moment. There is a human outbreak. And we have submitted a project to work on human plague, and maybe it will be interesting to see if chimpanzee may be infected, and if they react towards, let's say, dead rodents, because when you have plague outbreak, you have epizootics, and if you have a lot of rodents dying, what would happen if chimpanzees are around? So a lot of questions. And, I like ectoparasites. I know you like rather the endoparasites, right? But I like the ecto one. And I was surprised not to see a lot of research being done on wild ape population and the ticks, for example. But of course, it will be difficult to collect them because you will need to catch them.
Exactly.
But it will be interesting to think about a way how to recollect ectoparasites from wild monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how, but like rubbing with some kind of non-toxic dust.
Yeah, we've worked a little bit. I mean, there's some studies of I'm not sure about great apes, but certainly with smaller primates. In Madagascar, there's some cool studies of ectoparasites on mouse lemurs, for example.
I looked at
some clever
that,
studies. Yeah, but they're more based on capture. So, with great apes, you do have various teams that have been knocking down animals for various purposes, like health monitoring, vaccinating, whatever. So at that time, it might be possible, but it's usually to be avoided. I think.
Yeah, but if it happens, like as you said, in that kind of circumstances, I think it would be great if there was a systematic, exam of.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that would be something I would be very interested in looking at.
Sure. So just on that, like maybe to finish up here, you mentioned that you're with EcoHealth Alliance, and so you've been with them for, I guess, over a year. But so what are maybe you can just talk briefly about your time with EcoHealth Alliance and their, what their objectives are.
Yeah, and actually maybe I should, because they are also, let's say, at the heart of the communication about the coronavirus and 19 outbreak. So, and actually the work that I work there now it's nearly 3 years I've been working there, and I was hired on a huge USAID project which was called PREDICT, and the objective of PREDICT was to discover new zoonotic virus, especially in let's say in taxa that were considered major targets, like sold on bushmeat markets, for example. But not only like in Africa, it was in Asia and South America. So 10 years. And in 10 years, the project just closed, and PREDICT discovered 981 new viruses. So we don't know whether or not they are human pathogenic, apathogenic, whatever pathogenic. They are circulating, they are there. Of course, when I say new viruses, many of them is like viral sequences detected in rodents or bats or non-human primates, but also in humans, because there was also a syndromic component in the project. So people in hospital and in communities were also sampled. And the concept was quite interesting, and I think it's something to remember, because we were trapping the animals and at the same time doing all the sampling with people within a time frame of 21 days, so that if there was an emergence in the animal population, you might catch it in a human seeking care in the nearest hospital or clinics. So it was very well thought, I think. Yet I may be wrong, but I don't think that they had found the COVID-19. However, many coronaviruses have been found during this project. So we know a lot of coronaviruses are circulating in wildlife, but they are so far not pathogenic to humans.
Yeah, it seems like the virus hunting is really prominent these days, and it's just the diversity out there is pretty astounding. And I guess just picking, how is it possible to pick out of all of that, huge database now of things that are out there, like what might eventually cause a problem?
So yeah, it's difficult, and I think again, it's like there are diseases that get more publicity than others. Ebola is one of them. So we forget that there is still an ongoing Ebola outbreak in the Congo right now. But the PREDICT project has discovered a new strain of Ebola during the last 10 years. It's Bombali. Actually, it was published last year, but found already a few years ago. So it was released for publication last year. And so it's interesting, because it's Ebola, then of course more tests were performed to be able to say whether or not it might be or not human pathogenic. But there are viruses that we have so far maybe considered too mild, that somehow are not that mild when like they maybe mutate in a way that we didn't expect. And that's difficult, I think, to really predict. That's funny because it's called PREDICT. But it's interesting. So there are people are busy now seeing the closest relative to this new coronavirus, which one is the closest pathogenic and what's the genetic differences. But to do that, you need money. So of course, in those the current circumstances, there is the money to understand quickly how it evolved and how it may still evolve. But usually, you discover 900 viruses. Nobody has the money to do all the sequencing of the whole genome of all those viruses, and then do all the bioinformatics. It's understandable. So there are priorities, yeah. But yeah, it's I don't know what was the probability of this one emerging. I'm not a statistician.
Great. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
sharing your
Thank
experience.
You for inviting me.
Before you go, though, can you so if people are interested in learning more about EcoHealth Alliance, you can find it EcoHealth Alliance if you Google it. But also maybe you can just tell people how they can learn more about the Mbuda project.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me that. So yes, they can find out EcoHealth Alliance website. And also for Mbuda, we only have created now a Facebook, which is called Mbuda Film. So we post the news of the movie where we show it and a bit of the news. We haven't yet created like a page for the site, but it's the next steps, as I'm going to meet everybody from the Ituri next week if all goes well.
Okay, well, Anne Laudisoit, thank you very much for joining us on the PrimateCast. Wish you all the best of luck in your future endeavors. And
Thank
hope
you
to talk to
very
you
much.
again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You have been listening to the PrimateCast, a podcast series dedicated to all things primatology and wildlife science, to the conservation of species and to the dissemination of related scientific knowledge. The podcast is brought to you by the Center for International Collaboration and Advanced Study in Primatology at the Kyoto University Primate Research Institute. Visit us online at theprimatecast.com and follow our social media feeds on Facebook and Twitter at the PrimateCast. Conservation Voices is an offshoot of the PrimateCast, hosted and produced by Dr. Cecile Sarabian.